Hey guys, it's Jim Bounds at Motorhome Rehab Ranch, and I'm happy to be home from an incredible journey. And this set of videos is to talk about some things I learned about the fuel delivery system on the way to Utah and back. Last video ended with maybe a spoiler alert that we had to stop every 40 miles and clean out that glass filter. If we had not done that, we would not have gotten to Utah. I would have clogged injectors. There would have been a problem. Okay. Now, clogging clogging filters is a big deal. So the takeaway from the last video is you need to have filters, and you need to have them where you can get to them and clean them. And you need to filter going to your carburetor or to your throttle body less than 10 microns. And that's where you need to be. All right. So heading out, every 40 miles we stopped, cleaned the filter. How did we know that we needed to stop? Well, the fuel injection told us. On the FiTech screen, you have four readouts that you can look at constantly: air fuel ratio and AFR trim. AFR trim tells you what the system has to do to keep the air fuel ratio at around 14.1. Well, when we started noticing that it had to richen up the fuel a little bit, okay, and it's 0 to 100, we were usually standing at about 6 to 10, positive or negative. When we started seeing 50, and certainly over 50, that means that the correction was having to correct from the fuel flow. It was time to pull over. So if you have a FiTech system, set up your AFR, your air fuel ratio, and then set up the AFR trim. That really helped. We also watched the vacuum on the FiTech system. We wanted to try to keep our vacuum at about 10 inches at 60 miles an hour. 10 to 12 inches of vacuum. Going uphill, it would drop down, but it wouldn't drop to 0. If the AFR trim was high and we were climbing the hill, the vacuum would drop much further. Okay, so that also told us that we needed to pull over. So it's kind of interesting to have that opportunity to have those things, those tools with us to watch fuel flow. My guess is the 100 micron cleanable filter saved the electric fuel pump, and the 7 micron Wix filter saved the injectors. Okay, brought us all the way across the country with nasty fuel tanks. So what am I going to do? I got to get back. So we pulled out the fuel tanks. Sure enough, they were nasty inside. They were in really, really bad shape. Now, as everybody knows right now, Jason was one of the mechanics with me over at Co-op, is having aluminum tanks built, a 65-gallon tank. It's kind of funny. I actually carried 2 of those out there with me. Here we are cleaning our filters, and we had to fix in the coach. But of course, we couldn't change it on the road. Well, both of those tanks were used, so I got to get back. What am I going to do? It's about $500 to line a fuel tank. Now, you say, well, let's just clean it and not put anything else in it. The problem is when you clean a tank, really clean it with acid or some other chemicals, you actually also strip off the plating that's inside, the galvanized plating, so it will rust a lot faster. Chances are I wouldn't have been able to make, if I had it cleaned out and threw it back in, it probably wouldn't work. So what we did was we had one tank cleaned and lined. Yes, that's right, 25 gallons. That's how much I could afford. But 25 gallons of clean fuel as opposed to 50 gallons of nasty fuel. The theory is every 150, 140 miles I would stop and get gas. But to be honest with you, that's not a bad way to stop. I mean, you got to go pee anyway. You know, And you want to touch your hubs because you want to know the condition of your wheels. The front two will be the hottest, the middle will be less, and the back two will be the coolest. But you need to know the condition of your hubs. You need to know the temperature that the bearings or the brakes are creating. So to stop every 100, 150 miles was not a bad thing. And to have fuel, clean fuel, know that we had clean fuel the whole way was pretty good. Now, I also had a fuel gauge of sorts. You've seen these Chinese fuel gauges on these Chinese cars where, boy, it stays at high forever. And then when it starts to drop, it like drops like a rock. Well, there's one aftermarket fuel sender that one of the companies made that runs just like that. When it gets to a half, I needed 17 gallons. Now, it's a 25-gallon tank. You say when it gets to a half, it should be at about 12 gallons. Well, it wasn't. It was at 17 gallons. So that was is an operating fuel sender, but you don't believe it. You need to find out what the fuel sender is telling you. So when you're driving, you get it filled with fuel, and then you stop and fill it up. Do the math. See where it's at. See how much fuel you used, how far you went. Do the math and see what your mileage is. Not to know what the mileage is, but to see how much fuel you used. How far did you go? How much fuel did you use? That's an important thing to know. Don't believe the gas gauge. Gas gauges lie. This thing is too big to push, and a tow bill is going to melt your wallet trying to get it out of the turn lane when it ran out of gas. You don't ever, ever, ever want to run out of gas. And even with 25 gallons, I worked it out where every 100, 150 miles I stopped. I did the formula and made sure that I went this far, I filled it up, and this much gas went in there because it's not going to make gas. Gas will go at the same rate every time. To know how much fuel is in your gas tank or whatever fuel you have is very, very important. Not believe in the gas gauge. Know what your fuel is. Know what your fuel consumption is. Very, very important. Gas. What kind of gas you want to use? Well, if you can't use 87 octane regular gas, you're going to melt your wallet. It's going to be very expensive. You can't use the 85 or the ethanol gas because you're injected. Carburetors can't use 85 octane gas because it doesn't mix it properly. The carburetor is a spring-loaded series of air and fuel leaks. To leak air and to leak fuel together at 14.1. The problem is the fuel that we have today does not mix well with a carburetor because it is not gasoline as we think it is. This ethanol fuel needs to have fuel injection. It needs to break it up mechanically and with an injector to get it to burn efficiently. Okay? Now, if you're still running a carburetor, be sure you use 87 octane and be sure that you change your oil often because it's not mixing to 14.1 perfectly. Where does that unmixed fuel go? It goes past the rings into the oil, thins the oil out, and it will kill the motor. Now, if you want to keep running carburetors, which, hey, I like carburetors. I'm smarter than that thing. They're fine, but you just need to change the oil more often. Okay? Mileage is going to be just about the same. I got 8.5 miles a gallon coming across. After I got the timing set up, Phytech does not set the initial timing. After we changed the timing chain, we had so much play, I had it really advanced hard so it would run. After we put the timing chain in, I had to retard it a little bit to get where air-fuel ratio, air-fuel trim was 0, so it didn't have to add or subtract anymore, and the timing was set up. Then the fuel injection system took over and changed all the parameters, but I had to set up the initial timing. Does that have something to do with fuel? Well, yeah. How's it going to burn it? Okay. So coming back across, leaving Utah, my first mileage was about 7.5. Started advancing it a little bit closer. Got about 8.5, almost 9 miles a gallon with it. I have a 355 gear. and I was traveling in hills. But it worked fine. I had clean fuel. That was the big thing. Clean fuel. In the future, we'll have the aluminum tank. Maybe we'll have some other options. Right now, lining the fuel tank is really the only option you have. Two of them are very expensive. It's a shame that you can't have one because it'd probably be the same price to do one big one as it would two small ones. But you know, short term, the option of only having one fuel tank is not a bad idea. If you're in fuel injection, you want to have one cavity. One fuel tank is about $500 to line it. Save a little money there. Don't put a second one in, and just stop more often. It's not a bad idea. Also, if you put too much fuel in there and it sits for too long, the fuel separates and the fuel goes bad. So if you only got 25 gallons on board, you can be a lot lower in waste fuel mess. That's an idea. All right. Well, want to talk a little bit more about the numbers on how my fuel injection system acted coming back from Utah on flat land and in the hills. We'll get that in another episode. Takeaway here is you've got to have clean fuel. Okay, I got clean fuel because I made clean fuel on the way out, but you've got to carry clean fuel. Very important. Okay. Well, look, thank you for your time. I hope this was helpful to you. This got me across the country. It could get you out there too. If you do like it, please hit like, subscribe, and share on YouTube and on Patreon. Give me your input. Tell me what you think about this. I know we don't have any charts and stuff. I could do some charts, you know, but this is more of a download as to how my fuel system worked across country. And before I forget about it, I wanted to make a video on it. All right, so watch the next episode. We'll do some finals on the fuel system. And thanks for your time, and we'll see you next time.